Her true story. From Tennessee. When my daughter-in-law said, "This isn't a charity," I quietly took back the business I let them run. She wanted me gone. I took their income with me. This isn't a charity. We don't need you showing up with muffins and opinions. You're not an owner anymore. You're a leech, a parasite, feeding off work you don't even understand. Go back to your little smelly kitchen and let the real people work. I did not expect gratitude. Not really. Not after all these years. But I thought I still deserved decency. The morning I walked into the store, the very one I had built from scratch with my late husband, was like any other. A slow Tuesday, pale light pouring through the front windows, the scent of cardboard and detergent lingering in the air. I'd brought banana bread, warm and wrapped in wax paper, out of habit more than affection. They were at the back counter, my son Jason and his wife Amanda, arguing over an invoice. I waited until Amanda turned to grab the file folder before I said, "Sweetheart, I noticed this invoice from Samuel's Supply listed double the amount. I think it might be an error. You might want to double-check before it." Amanda didn't even look at me. She slammed the folder shut and spun around with a rage I'd only ever seen from the outside of police reports. "Oh my God," she barked, loud enough for the front cashier to hear. "You're seriously questioning our invoices now?" Jason flinched, but didn't speak. "I'm just saying," I began gently, hands still holding the bread. She cut me off, her voice rising like sirens. "Do you even know what it takes to keep this place running now?" she hissed. "Do you know how much we've had to pay to keep the lights on, the staff paid, the shipments coming in?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Amanda stepped forward, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with venom. "Do you know how exhausting it is to keep pretending that your great legacy means something in today's economy?" she spat. "You think because you sold light bulbs in 1983 that you know how to run a business in 2024? Silence fell like a curtain. Jason looked down. The cashier stopped typing. I felt the banana bread grow heavy in my hands. Amanda wasn't done. "This isn't a charity, Margaret," she snapped with a theatrical wave of her arms. "We don't need you showing up with muffins and opinions. You're not an owner anymore. You're a leech, a parasite, feeding off work you don't even understand." The word leech landed like a slap, but she smiled, triumphant, like she had finally said what she'd been dying to say. Then came the final blow. "Go back to your little smelly kitchen and let the real people work." A single laugh escaped one of the younger clerks before he quickly looked down. Everyone else went stiff. No one said a word. Not even Jason. Especially not Jason. I stood there, blinking. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the insult or the fact that no one defended me, not even my own son. I looked at him. He looked at the floor. I turned without a sound, walked past the shelves I once built by hand, past the cash register where I used to tape lollipops for kids, past the Employee of the Month plaques I used to polish with pride. Not a single person followed me. Not a single person thanked me for the banana bread. I stepped outside, where the sunlight had gone flat. The wind pressed against my blouse, and I realized for the first time in years just how cold it had gotten. I did not cry. I did not scream. But something inside me shifted, quietly, permanently. They thought I was just an old woman clinging to memories. But what they forgot, what Amanda never bothered to learn, was that while they ran the day-to-day, I still owned the account that paid the bills. I had never removed my name from the company's founding documents. I had never handed over the deed, or the original license, or the master key to the systems. I had let them operate. I had given them the space to lead. I had stepped back, but I had never stepped out. That afternoon, I went home and pulled out the old file cabinet tucked in the guest room closet. It still smelled like lemon oil and printer ink. The metal clicked as I opened the drawer, and there it was. My name bold and clear on the account papers. My name on the tax records. My name on the LLC documentation. And every month for the past 20 years, the bank had sent me copies of the statements. I'd skimmed them, occasionally checked for errors. I never said anything. But now, I saw it differently. It wasn't just numbers anymore. It was leverage, power they forgot I had because I chose to be silent. I folded the papers, slid them into a fresh envelope, and placed them on my desk. I looked out the window of my quiet house, and for the first time in a long time, I did not feel alone. I felt awake. They had wanted me out. Amanda had practically screamed it into the walls of a business I'd built with blistered hands and sleepless nights. Well, if she wanted me gone, she should have remembered whose name was still on the account. because I didn't leave that day out of sadness. I left because I was done being tolerated, and I was ready, finally, to remind them exactly who built the ground they stood on. Not with a fight, not with fire, but with paper, with numbers, with the kind of truth you cannot scream over. Because when the foundation cracks, it's not always loud. Sometimes it just shifts, and then everything above it starts to fall. You do not build something like that overnight. It took me and my husband Walter 10 years just to break even. We started with nothing but a rusted pickup truck, a folding table, and a stubborn belief that people still needed good, honest things. Light bulbs that did not burn out in a week, mops that did not snap after 2 uses, and basic supplies that you could actually afford. Walter handled the tools, I handled the customers. We set up shop on weekends at flea markets across Tennessee, rain, shine, or snow. I used to joke that if I sold enough bleach in one weekend, I could finally afford a pair of shoes without a hole in the sole. But we grew, from the pickup to a roadside stall, from the stall to a single-room store with 1 light and 1 cash register, then 2 rooms, then 3. By the time Jason turned 12, we had a full storefront, 2 stories, and a small team of employees who called me Miss Maggie and knew Walter's laugh before they saw his face. We didn't get rich, but we earned enough to stop worrying about gas money. After Walter passed, quietly at home, one morning just before our 35th anniversary, I kept the business going. It hurt at first, not just losing him, but having to walk past the shelf he built, the old coffee mug he left in the backroom sink, the way he used to write little notes on the supply orders just to make the delivery guys laugh. I didn't change anything for a while. I just ran the place like he would have wanted. Jason was 23 then. He'd just come back from 2 years of trying and failing to launch a tech startup with a college friend. When he asked to help with the shop, my heart jumped. I saw it as a full-circle moment. The son stepping into the shoes of his father. Legacy. Continuity. I thought, finally, someone who will carry this without needing me to carry them. And for a while, it felt that way. Jason was good with customers, quicker than I was with spreadsheets. He had ideas about online ordering and digital inventory systems. I didn't always understand them, but I encouraged him. He said he wanted to grow the business, modernize it. I said yes. And in doing so, I began to step back. First, I stopped coming in daily, then weekly. Eventually, I was only there for tax season and holidays. But I never signed over the full rights. I kept my name on the LLC. I remained the primary account holder for the... No one ever asked me to remove it, and I never offered. Every month, the bank sent me the statements. I barely glanced at them, trusting that things were fine. Jason took care of the storefront. Amanda, once she came into the picture, took over inventory and vendor management. I focused on gardening, quiet mornings, and the little house Walter and I used to dream of retiring in. But I never disconnected completely. The system had been set up with me at the core. Everything filtered back to me, even if they no longer noticed. It wasn't until the night after Amanda's outburst that I started reading the reports more closely. The folder of bank statements had been sitting in my hall cabinet for months, untouched. I pulled it out, sat at the kitchen table, and flipped through them with the glasses I rarely wore. At first, it all looked standard. Supply orders, payroll, utilities. Then I noticed something. A weekly withdrawal, always the same amount, always labeled Operations Float, but with no corresponding receipt or explanation. I checked back through the previous months. It was consistent, every Thursday. Sometimes split into 2 entries, sometimes pulled at once. Thousands of dollars. Gone. I checked the vendor statements next. Invoices paid to companies I had never heard of. Shell names. Vague descriptions like specialty logistics or customer optimization. They sounded like real businesses, but they were not on our original supplier list. I dug deeper, traced routing numbers, cross-referenced the amounts, and that's when I felt it. Not anger, not yet, but a slow, cold confirmation. Someone was bleeding the business, not just skimming off the top, but doing it through deliberate, coordinated entries. And I had let it happen. Because I trusted them, because I believed that blood wouldn't betray. But blood does not protect you from entitlement. Legacy does not guarantee respect. I sat back in the chair, stared at the numbers, and felt the weight of every silent month I had spent in the background. Every time I let Amanda wave me away, Every time Jason didn't speak up, every time I told myself it was fine, it was not fine. And now, I had proof, not just of carelessness, but of theft. They thought the past no longer mattered, but they forgot one thing. I had never stopped watching, and I still owned the map to everything they built on my name. I didn't go to the police, not yet. I went to the bank, not just any branch, but the old one. The one on Maple Avenue with the green carpet and the bell above the door that chimed like it belonged in a diner. It felt strange walking back in there. The last time I'd been inside that building, I was helping Walter co-sign a loan for our first delivery truck. The teller was maybe 20 then, all nerves and dimples. Now he ran the place. "Martin Lyles," I said, stepping up to the front desk. "You still owe me $500. He looked up, blinked, then let out a slow, stunned laugh. "Margaret Adams," he said, shaking his head. "I'd know that voice anywhere." "You borrowed from petty cash during a plumbing emergency," I said, raising an eyebrow. "You promised to pay it back with blueberry pie." He grinned, eyes sparkling. "I remember. You brought pie and a wrench. That's why I still have a job." We sat down in his office, the blinds drawn, a cup of hot tea between us. I showed him the records, the duplicate transactions, the withdrawals labeled float with no corresponding deposits. Martin leaned back, lips pursed. "This isn't just careless bookkeeping," he said. "This is structured, intentionally layered. It's not large enough to trigger federal red flags, but it's consistent. Too consistent." He tapped a few keys, then turned his screen toward me. "There's a second account," he said. "Opened under the business name, but with a different EIN. Same business address, different registration. It was added 6 months ago. Guess whose name's on the contact info?" He didn't need to say it. "Amanda. She had set up a shadow account." I nodded, jaw tight. "She's been funneling cash out, probably off the book sales or inventory overcharges. I've seen shell vendor names that don't match with any approved supplier. They're laundering small amounts, just enough to keep under the radar." Martin looked at me, sympathy and quiet admiration blending on his face. "You want to flag it?" he asked. "Freeze it?" "Not yet," I said. "Not until I understand the full scope. Because if I moved too early, she'd cover her tracks, erase the invoices, spin the story, and I wasn't interested in vengeance. I wanted the truth, documented. So I went back to work, not in the store, but in the records. I traced payments made to a L&J distribution, supposedly based in Chattanooga. When I called the listed number, it went straight to voicemail. I searched the registration, found nothing but a P.O. box and a defunct website. Another invoice went to Bright West Marketing, which claimed to manage the store's social media campaigns. Funny thing was, the store barely had a Facebook page, and Amanda had always dismissed digital marketing as wasteful. That's when the pieces started falling into place. She was laundering money, hiding small amounts through ghost vendors, possibly run by friends or family. And Jason? Either he was blind, or he was pretending to be. I printed everything, dated it, annotated each payment trail. I built a case like I'd once built inventory systems. Slow, careful, undeniable. It hurt, not just because of the fraud, but because I saw it coming. I saw the way Amanda changed once she realized Jason had control. I saw the way she scanned the employee handbook like a hawk, then rewrote it to remove holiday bonuses. I saw how she cut hours for the oldest staff first. I saw it all, and I had stayed quiet, thinking I was being generous, letting them find their way. But silence, I realized, is not always kindness. Sometimes it's complicity. One afternoon, I followed Amanda's car. She drove to a quiet strip mall 2 towns over, parked in front of a boutique I didn't recognize. She went inside, stayed 10 minutes, came out with a small envelope. I waited. Then I went inside. The woman behind the counter smiled. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, tapping the receipt printer. "Can I see your vendor log for Bright West Marketing?" She froze. "I'm sorry?" I smiled, soft but steady. "Don't worry. You won't get in trouble. I just need to confirm whether it's a real business, or just a name your friend uses when she needs to move cash." The woman didn't answer, but her eyes did. That night, I sat on the porch with the file folder in my lap, and the wind pressing against the screen door. It wasn't rage that filled me. It was resolve. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to shame them publicly. I just needed to finish building the truth. Because what Amanda had built was a house of cards, and I had found the breeze. The first person I called wasn't the IRS. It was Evelyn. She used to come into the store every other Thursday, years ago, always dressed in a navy boot pantsuit, always with a folder tucked under her arm. We sold her printer cartridges and filing cabinets. She told me once that she admired how I did business, quietly, cleanly, no drama. Back then, she was a junior attorney at a local firm. Now, she ran her own practice. I still had her card, tucked in a Rolodex on my hallway shelf. Evelyn Martinson, speaking. Still keeping people out of jail? I asked. A pause. Then laughter. Margaret? Margaret Adams? Are you calling me to finally sue your landlord for bad plumbing? I'm calling because I need to move fast, I said, and because I need someone I can trust. By the end of the week, we were sitting in her office, a cup of black tea between us, my folder of documents spread across her mahogany desk. She flipped through everything: bank statements, vendor trails, the ghost suppliers, Amanda's shadow account. When she got to the notarized business documents with my name as primary owner, she smiled. You've got them cornered, she said. I don't want a court battle, I replied. I just want to take back what I built. She nodded. Then, here's what we'll do. We spent 2 hours drawing up a plan. Step 1. Freeze the shadow account. Evelyn filed a notice through the bank's legal department, citing misuse of business identity and unauthorized financial activity under the parent entity. Martin, the branch manager, made the call himself. Step 2. Pull the operating capital. I withdrew every cent from the primary business account, $68,400 in total, and transferred it to a protected trust account under my name. It was clean, legal. I owned the company. I was simply reclaiming funds. Step 3. Issue a formal demand for independent audit. Evelyn drafted the letter with surgical precision. We sent it by registered mail, email, and, just for old-fashioned flavor, fax. Step 4. Alert the Tennessee Department of Revenue to potential tax discrepancies tied to the shadow vendor trail. We didn't accuse. We simply pointed out inconsistencies. That's all it took to raise a red flag. By Tuesday, the trap was set. I went back home, poured myself a glass of sweet tea, and waited. It didn't take long. The phone rang at 7:42 p.m. Caller ID, Amanda. I let it ring twice before picking up. She didn't even say hello. What the hell did you do? She screamed, voice shrill, panic barely hidden beneath the rage. The accounts are frozen. We can't pay suppliers. What are you playing at? I sipped my tea. I'm not playing, Amanda, I'm cleaning. This is illegal, she hissed. You can't just take our money. This is our company. I smiled. No, Amanda, it's my company. You borrowed it. You used it. You disrespected it. But you never owned it. Silence. Then she snapped. We've worked for years on this. Jason has poured his life into it. You think you can just walk in and destroy everything? I set the glass down gently. I didn't destroy anything, I said. You did. I just pulled back the curtain. If there's nothing behind it but smoke and mirrors, that's on you. Her voice trembled now. You can't do this to us. You already did it to yourselves, I said, then ended the call. I sat there a moment longer, listening to the hum of the fridge, the rustle of wind against the shutters. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened, not triumphant, not cruel, just clean. The kind of clean you only get after scrubbing something for hours, knowing it will never be perfect, but at least now, it is yours again. That night I folded Evelyn's letter into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote 2 words across the front in cursive: return claim. And with that, I reclaimed not just my business, but my name, my voice, and the dignity Amanda thought I had traded for silence. She was wrong. I had not traded anything. I had simply waited. And now, the waiting was over. You can always tell when a business is dying, not by the numbers, but by the silence. The hum of printers slows, the break room becomes quieter, people walk a little faster, speak a little softer, avoid eye contact in hallways. They stop putting pictures on their desks. They stop refilling the candy jar. By Thursday, the cashier Shelley called in sick. On Friday, one of the stock boys texted Jason, "Are we getting paid this week? My rent's due." No answer. Vendors started calling. Emails bounced back from Amanda's inbox, which had mysteriously gone offline. The store's Instagram page went from new arrivals to account not found. I heard from Martin again. They missed their loan payment, he said. No response to our notices. How long do they have? I asked. Technically, 3 days. But the truth was, they were already out of time. Online reviews began to shift. customers complaining of delayed orders, rude responses, and unshipped products. Someone on Yelp said they'd been promised a refund for a backordered vacuum, but hadn't heard anything in weeks. Then the returns came. Boxes showed up at the store unopened, labeled refused or returned to sender. There was no staff to sort them. Amanda had slashed hours to save money, and most part-timers had simply stopped showing up. By Monday, Jason came to my house. He didn't knock right away. He just stood in the driveway, hands in his pockets, like he was still thinking it over. I opened the door before he could raise his hand. "Hi," he said. His eyes were swollen, tired. The same eyes he had as a boy, when he'd come home with scraped knees, trying to hide the tears. I said nothing. He stepped inside, slowly, like a man walking into a church he had not visited in years. "Mom," he began, then stopped. The words sounded heavy in his mouth. I waited. We're ruined," he said. "Amanda's trying to talk to new suppliers, but no one will work with us now. They think we're unstable." He looked at me, pleading. "Mom, why are you doing this? We're your family." I didn't answer right away. I walked over to my desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out a worn file folder. Aged, yellowed, corners soft from years of handling. I handed it to him. He opened it. There on the first page was the business registration from 1991. My name, written in black ink, Margaret L. Adams, founder and principal owner. He stared at it for a long time. "I never changed it," I said quietly. "You never asked, you assumed." He looked up, throat tight. "But we worked so hard." "You worked hard," I agreed. "But you worked off a foundation you did not build. And then you let Amanda tear it apart." He shook his head, voice cracking. "She didn't mean to." "She meant every word she said to me in that office," I interrupted, gently but firmly. "You both did, and that's fine. You're adults. You wanted control. You had it." I stepped back, folding my hands. "But control comes with consequence. You cannot disrespect the roots and still expect the tree to bear fruit." Jason looked like he wanted to speak, maybe defend himself, maybe apologize, but the words never came. He looked down again at the paper. The ink that time had not erased, and I saw it dawn on him, the truth. Not just that he had lost the company, but that he had never really understood what it meant to own something, to carry it, to protect it, to honor it. He left an hour later, quieter than he had arrived. He did not take the file with him. He just placed it gently back on the table and walked out, shoulders hunched, hands empty. And I sat alone, with the sun beginning to dip below the horizon. The silence in the house no longer cold, but clean, because sometimes what falls apart is not broken. It is simply what was never built strong enough to last. There's a phone number I hadn't dialed in over 15 years. It still lived in my address book, written in smudged ink beside the name Fred B. Old Mule, Old Money. That was my husband Walter's nickname for him. A stubborn man, with calloused hands and a face like weathered oak. Fred had run a rival hardware store 3 towns over. Back in the day, we competed over everything. Price wars, supplier contracts, who had the better 4th of July sale. But we never hated each other. Just 2 aging warhorses, riding the same dirt road in opposite directions. Amanda once called him a fossil, said his storefront smelled like mothballs and failure. She laughed at how he still used fax machines and handwritten ledgers. Funny thing is, Fred's business outlasted 3 recessions. Never flashy, but always upright. I remembered that, so I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Fred Barker speaking. This is Margaret Adams." A pause. "Lord have mercy," he muttered, then chuckled. "To what do I owe the pleasure of a call from my oldest nemesis?" I smiled. "I'm about to hand you the opportunity of a lifetime." By Friday, we were sitting across from each other at McCormick's Diner. Same booth we used to meet in once a year, to bury the hatchet over cornbread and bitter coffee. Fred looked older, sure, but he still had the same steel in his eyes, the kind of man who didn't need many words, just good terms and a firm handshake. I slid the folder across the table. Inside, full ownership documents, trademark, supplier contracts, transfer paperwork, pre-signaled by me. He leafed through it, eyebrows climbing higher. "You selling it?" he asked, not hiding his surprise. "I am. And the catch? 2, I said. 1. No member of my family is to be hired, consulted, or contracted in any capacity. No Jason, No Amanda. Not even my niece, if she shows up wearing a fake smile. He nodded. 2, you keep the store name, but change the tagline. To what? I pulled out a slip of paper and passed it to him. He read it aloud, slowly. Back to integrity. He looked up. His lips twitched into something like a grin. You always were the quiet type with the sharpest knives, he said. No knives, I said softly. Just standards. Fred tapped the folder. Everything looks clean. Business in the black? Temporarily distressed, I admitted. But the bones are solid. The inventory's good. The customer base is loyal if you win them back with honesty. He didn't hesitate. I'll wire the full amount by Monday. He was true to his word. By Tuesday morning, Evelyn called to confirm the transfer was complete. By Wednesday, Amanda received the formal notice by certified mail. I imagined the moment, her at the kitchen table, tearing open the envelope with manicured nails, reading the words. As of this date, your rights to act in any managerial or executive capacity within store name have been terminated due to full transfer of ownership. Please vacate the premises by 5 p.m. Friday. It wasn't personal. It was contractual. It was professional. It was just done. I didn't watch her reaction, didn't eavesdrop, didn't celebrate, but I did go to the store that Friday, just as the sun dipped low. Fred was already there, clipboard in hand, giving directions to 2 staff members in red polos. The shelves were being restocked. A fresh coat of paint was on the door. The handwritten, closed for inventory sign had a note beneath it. Reopening soon, with values you'll recognize. I stepped in, and Fred tipped his head. Thought you might swing by, he said. I nodded. Just wanted to see the place one last time. He gestured toward the back wall. A new placard was already being mounted beside the registers. It read, Margaret's Corner, for the woman who built this with her bare hands and her unshakable spine. I stared at it, unable to speak. Fred looked down at his clipboard, clearing his throat, like he hadn't just honored me more than my own family ever had. I figured customers ought to know where it all started, he said. I blinked, swallowing something I hadn't expected. Thank you, I said. He nodded. Thank you, for keeping the lights on, for knowing when to pass the torch before it burned the whole thing down. I left quietly, with the sun behind me and no one calling my name. But that night, as I sat on my porch, with the crickets singing and my tea just warm enough to hold, I realized something. Amanda had wanted me gone, and now she was, not by cruelty, not by vengeance, but by the same quiet hand that once built every shelf in that store. The hand that now passed the key to someone who still believed in keeping promises, counting every dollar, and never, ever, biting the hand that built the ladder. Fred would do just fine, and as for me, I had already begun building something else, something slower, softer, mine. Because the truth is, it was never about punishing them. It was about preserving what mattered, and handing it off, not to blood, but to integrity. The quiet came like a balm. After everything, I settled into the old house on Sycamore Lane, the one Walter and I bought when we were still dreaming, when we thought retirement meant gardening, not lawsuits and account ledgers. It was a small place. 2 bedrooms, squeaky floors, the scent of cedar in the closets. But it had a porch with a view of the hills and a kitchen that caught the morning sun just right. And most importantly, it had peace. I spent my mornings tending tomatoes, my afternoons reading the paper, and my evenings listening to the radio while patching up old quilts. It was the kind of life I used to think I had to earn, with decades of noise and sacrifice. Now I realized it had been waiting for me the whole time. I just had to claim it. Fred's version of the store found its footing quickly. Word spread that the old soul was back, even if not in person. Customers returned, not for sales or gimmicks, but for something harder to find these days. They said it was the same feeling they used to get when I ran things. That mattered to me more than any profit margin. One morning I was trimming herbs near the back fence when my neighbor walked over, phone in hand. You see the news yet, Maggie? I shook my head, wiping my hands on my apron. She turned the screen toward me. Local news headline, center of the page. Long-time family business transferred amid allegations of financial misconduct. No names were mentioned. No direct accusation, just enough detail for anyone who had ever shopped there to connect the dots. The photo accompanying it showed the storefront, fresh paint, new sign, under Fred's management. But the comments told the real story. I always wondered what happened to the woman who built that place. Heard the daughter-in-law was cooking more than just the books. Good to see integrity back behind the counter. I didn't gloat, but I also didn't look away. Because sometimes, the dignity we protect in silence gets its voice from the world later, on its own terms. A few weeks later, I heard through Evelyn that Amanda had been flagged in a preliminary audit. 3 years of inconsistent filings, questionable deductions, unreported cash transfers. She might get hit with back taxes, Evelyn said. Possibly worse if she fights it. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. There was nothing more for me to do. No more fixing, no more forgiving, no more explaining. The truth had spoken, quietly, and I had moved on. Because dignity, I learned, is not something someone else can take from you. It's something you choose not to give away, even when they're shouting, even when they think you've lost. And sometimes, the most expensive thing you ever own is your self-respect. I sat on my porch that evening, sipping tea, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, and thought, they tried to shame me for sitting still. But stillness isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's the final, firmest stand. It was a warm Sunday evening when she asked me. Lena, my neighbor's daughter, no more than 22, sat on the edge of my porch with her knees pulled to her chest and curiosity in her eyes. You were the one who used to run that store, right? She asked, squinting toward the horizon. I nodded, folding my newspaper. My mom said you started it with your husband, that it was a real family place. It was, I said. Until it wasn't. She hesitated, biting her lip. Do you miss it? The business, I mean. I smiled, slow and soft. I miss the people, the conversations, the feeling of being needed. But I don't miss the noise, the kind that comes from folks who don't understand what you've built, but still feel entitled to tear it down. Lena tilted her head. It's just, you don't seem bitter. After everything. Bitterness is heavy, I said. It rots the container it lives in. I've carried enough in my life. I'm not about to let someone else's pride weigh me down. She was quiet for a moment. Then I told her what no one ever told me when I was her age. People think old age makes you fragile, but it doesn't. It makes you sharper. It makes you remember. Remember what? Everything, I said. Who helped, who watched, who smiled while cutting deep. We're not weak, Lena. We're just quiet longer. But when we speak, we don't forget the truth. Later that night after she left, I went inside and pulled open the drawer in my writing desk. Inside was the final contract, the sale agreement with Fred. My name still sat at the top of the page, in bold. Below it, signatures and terms. My conditions clearly written, my boundaries respected. I ran my hand over the paper once, then folded it neatly and slid it back into the envelope. There was no bitterness, just closure. These days, my evenings are filled with softer sounds. The rustle of trees, the slow shuffle of pages in a book, the distant murmur of a baseball game on the radio. No yelling, no slammed doors, no one calling me a burden. There's peace. And when I pass the mirror in the hallway, I sometimes see the woman I used to be, the one who stayed quiet, who excused disrespect, who thought survival meant shrinking. I nod at her. I thank her, because she endured long enough to become this woman, the one who stood up, even if it took her decades. Now I live on my own terms, not grandly, not loudly, but fully. And when folks ask me what happened, why I left, how I let go of the business, I say the same thing every time. She wanted me to disappear, so I let her disappear from the career I built. And I kept my dignity, along with a little retirement money, just enough to live quietly, without anyone's pity. Thank you for listening, sweetheart. If this story reminded you of your own silence, your own patience, or your own quiet strength, then remember, dignity doesn't make noise. It just waits, and when the time comes, it stands tall, even if it's wearing old shoes and has silver in its hair. Here on Grandma, True Stories, we don't shout. We remember. We tell it straight, just as it happened. For every woman who gave everything and was told she was still not enough, this is your seat at the table. So if this story stirred something in you, subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Because when a grandmother finally speaks, the truth doesn't whisper, it echoes.